This morning we want to talk about the characteristics of healthy families. Each of us is a product of a family of origin which played or which continues to play a significant role in shaping who we are. To a large extent, the family can be considered the bedrock of society. When problems and circumstances such as parent alcoholism, mental illness, child abuse, or extreme parental rigidity and control interfere with family functioning, the effects on children can sometimes linger long after these children have grown up and left their problem families. Adults raised in dysfunctional families frequently report difficulties forming and maintaining intimate relationships, maintaining positive self-esteem, and trusting others. They fear a loss of control and deny their feelings and reality. Dysfunctional relationships and a tumultuous family life contribute to societal problems, including juvenile delinquency, domestic abuse, and addiction. Successful families contribute to their communities, and they nurture future generations to do the same. To illustrate the impact of family upon society, there are two families from the state of New York who were studied very carefully. One was the Max Jukes family, and the other was the Jonathan Edwards family. The thing that they discovered in this study is remarkable. Like begets like. Max Jukes was an unbelieving man, and he married a woman of like character who lacked principle. And among the known descendants, over 1,200 were studied. 310 became professional vagrants. 440 physically wrecked their lives by debauched lifestyle. 130 were sent to the prison for an average of 13 years each. 7 for murder, 3, or rather there were over 100 who became alcoholics, 60 became habitual thieves, 190 public prostitutes. And of the 20 who learned the trade, 10 of them learned the trade in state prison. It cost the state about 1.5 million US dollars, and they made no contribution whatsoever to society. In about the same era, the family of Jonathan Edwards came on the scene, and Jonathan Edwards, a man of God, married a woman of like character, and their family began, and they became a part of this study that was made. 300 became clergymen, missionaries, and theological professors. Over 100 became college professors. Over 100 became attorneys. 30 of them judges. 60 of them became physicians. Over 60 became authors of good classics and good books. 14 became presidents of universities. There were numerous giants in American industry that emerged from this family. And 3 became United States congressmen, and 1 became the vice president of the United States. You know, in Malachi 2:15, God clearly indicates that one of the reasons why he has formed families was because he requires godly seed. And the family, primarily, is charged with the major responsibility of shaping the society. Every manufacturing company is judged by the quality of its products. Every tree is identified by its fruit. And this morning I want to challenge us to examine our own families today and make an evaluation about its health. But before going further, we must ask the question, does a family have to be perfect to be healthy? Thumbing through the pages of Scripture, I find no account of a perfect family. And that may surprise some of you, from Genesis right down to Revelation. every single family that I could identify have some dysfunction. And nevertheless, some of them fulfill their role, and others didn't. You know, when we look at the health of biblical families, first of all, the first family had parents who were nurtured by God himself. Yet one of the sons harbored jealousy and murdered his brother. But it was still the family who raised Abel, a true worshiper, and Seth, through whom we trace the bloodline to Jesus Christ. Noah was perfect in his generation. He demonstrated wholehearted obedience to God and the qualities of a true worshiper, but was disrespected by one of his sons while he was found lying naked in a drunken stupor. Abraham, the father of faith, fathered a child with a house help, which resulted in sibling rivalry, the effects of which we still experience today with the deep-seated rift between Arabs and the Jews. Jacob created a blended family with 2 wives and their maids who also mothered children for him. And this resulted in a level of sibling rivalry which resulted in brothers teaming up to plot the murder of a younger sibling and eventually selling him out as a slave to foreigners. Nonetheless, this same young man grew up to be a faithful, committed servant of God who was granted the wisdom to guide the world out of the effects of an international famine and saved his family in so doing. Eli, the high priest, raised 2 sons who were scoundrels, treating the Lord's offering with contempt by taking for themselves all the prime cuts of meat from sacrifices and committing adultery with the woman who served at the sanctuary entrance. So they stole from the church and they slept around with a woman who worked in the church. And Eli scolds them very mildly and fails to influence them to do right. And as a result, they attracted the judgment of God. But while Eli failed to train his biological sons, he taught his successor to discern the voice of God. Samuel, who succeeded Eli, was a very effective priest, prophet, and judge of Israel. But like his mentor Eli, he raised sons who did not follow in his ways. Jesus Christ belonged to a blended family. He was raised by a stepfather, and his brethren did not believe in him until after his death. Even his mother misunderstood his teenage passion to be about his father's business, God's business. Timothy became a pastor who was at least a 3rd-generation believer, but only because of the faith of his mother and grandmother. There is no mention of any male blood relative influencing his life for God. I don't know if he was a product of a single family. You know, some of us, we have 2 mothers, our mother and our grandmother. Or if his father was just an unsafe person, so there was no need to mention because he didn't have any spiritual influence. And we could go on, but the point is that the Bible is replete with families who at least, or rather who were less than perfect. It's clear to me that no family could ever be perfect, because all families are comprised of imperfect beings. And the whole can't be ideal if there are flawed parts. So if we can't reach perfect, at least we could aim for healthy. How many agree with me? But what constitutes a healthy family? Is it only the nucleus family with a married mother and father that could be healthy? How important is the structure of the family to its health? Now, while research has shown that children fare better in homes with their both biological parents, and I say biological parents because sometimes we have issues with step-parents. And sometimes the issues that arise with some step-parents, the children will fare better by being raised by a single parent. This is quite complicated, you will understand. So while research has shown that children fare better in homes with their both biological parents, some single families fare better than some two-parent dysfunctional families. So what type of family you find yourself in, focusing on the health of the family is more important than merely focusing on the structure of the family. That's why when young people get pregnant out of wedlock, I don't force them into marriage. Because sometimes you are perpetuating a dysfunction. Family dysfunction can be a condition that interferes with healthy family functioning. Most families have some periods of time when functioning is impaired by stressful circumstances like death in a family, a parent's serious illness. Healthy families tend to return to normal functioning after the crisis passes. In dysfunctional families, however, problems tend to be chronic and children do not consistently get their needs met. Negative patterns of parental behavior tend to be dominant in their children's lives. There are many types of dysfunctions in families. TWU Counseling Center identifies some types of parental dysfunction, along with some common problems associated with each. You have deficient parents. We're looking at some characteristics of unhealthy families. Deficient parents or dysfunctional families. Deficient parents hurt their children more by omission than by commission. Some parents underfunction. There's no control. There is no direction. Just pamper the children and leave them to develop for themselves. Leave them even sometimes to fend for themselves. Other parents overfunction. There is over-control, never allowing their children to grow up and be on their own. Others are inconsistent, or they violate basic boundaries of appropriate behavior. Frequent chronic mental illness or a disabling physical illness contributes to parental inadequacy. And children then tend to take on adult responsibilities from a young age in these families. Parental emotional needs tend to take precedence, and children are often asked to be their parents' caretakers. Children are robbed of their own childhood, and they learn to ignore their own needs and feelings. And because these children are simply unable to play an adult role and to take care of their parents, they often feel inadequate and guilty. And these feelings continue into adulthood. The controlling parents, unlike the deficient parents, they fail to allow their children to assume responsibility that is appropriate for their age. So you have one who just abdicates responsibility and the children have too much. And then you have those who take on too much of responsibility and the children never learn to be responsible. And these parents continue dominating and making decisions for their children well beyond the age at which this is necessary. Controlling parents are often driven by a fear of becoming unnecessary to their children. And sometimes this could be a defect in some single families. This fear leaves them feeling betrayed and abandoned when their children become independent. On the other hand, these children frequently feel resentful, inadequate, and powerless. Transitions into adult roles are quite difficult, as these adults frequently have difficulties making decisions independent from their parents. And when they act independently, these adults feel very guilty, as if growing up was a serious act of disloyalty. So some dysfunctional families are as a result of deficient parents, who really create an offense by omission more than commission. But then you have some issues that are really caused by actions of the parents themselves rather than by the inaction, like parents with addictions. Families with addictions tend to be chaotic and unpredictable. Rules that apply one day don't apply the next day. Promises are neither kept nor remembered. Expectations vary from one day to the next. Parents may be strict at times and indifferent at others. In addition, emotional expression is frequently forbidden, and discussion about the addiction or related family problems is usually non-existent. Family members are usually expected to keep problems a secret, thus preventing anyone from seeking help. And all of these factors leave children feeling insecure, frustrated, and angry. Children often feel there must be something wrong with them which makes their parents behave this way. Mistrust of others, difficulty with emotional expression, and difficulties with intimate relationships carry over into adulthood. Children of parents with addictions are at much higher risk of developing addictions than other children. And then there are abusive parents. Now, abuse can be verbal, physical, or sexual. Verbal abuse such as frequent belittling criticism could have lasting effects, particularly when it comes from those entrusted with the child's care. Criticisms can be aimed at the child's looks. You're so black and ugly. You don't resemble none of us, is the lady downstairs child. Or it could be criticism of the child's intelligence. You're so dumb and dotish, you'll amount to nothing. The child's capabilities, or even the child's basic value. Some verbal abuses are very direct, while some verbal abusers use very subtle put-downs disguised as humor. Both types are just as damaging. Definitions of physical abuse, however, vary widely. Many parents at one time or another have felt the urge to put a good licking on their children. And there is a thin line between discipline and abuse. Matter of fact, the line is not so thin, but where you cross over is a thin line. You see, discipline is supposed to be accompanied with instruction and correction. Most times, abuse is just about venting the parent's frustration and has nothing to do with the development of the child. The whole motivation is different. With physically abusive parents, however, the urge is frequent, and little effort is made to control this impulse. The Federal Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act in the U.S. defines physical abuse as the infliction of physical injuries such as bruises, burns, welts, cuts, bone or skull fractures, and these are caused by kicking, punching, biting, beating, knifing, and using instruments like scissor stick and broomstick and PVC, or anything you put your hand on. Striking children has much to do with meeting the parents' emotional needs and nothing to do with concern for the child. And that is abuse. And parents often erroneously justify the abuse as discipline intended to help the child. Physically abusive parents can create an environment of terror for a child, particularly since violence is often random and unpredictable. You don't know when you're going to get it. In the middle of your sleep, anything. As a result, abused children often feel anger. Children of abusive parents have tremendous difficulties developing feelings of trust and safety, and even in their adult lives. And then there is sexual abuse. Now, while parents may justify or rationalize verbal or physical abuse as discipline aimed at somehow helping a child, there is absolutely no rationalization for sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is the most blatant example of an adult abusing a child purely for the adult's own gratification. Sexual abuse can be any physical contact between an adult and a child where that contact must be kept secret. Demonstrations of affection, such as hugging, kissing, or stroking a child's hair that can be done openly, are quite acceptable and even beneficial. But when physical contact is shrouded in secrecy, then it is most likely inappropriate. I always tell my children anything that is secret is wrong. Any relationship, any activity, any conversation, why does it have to be secret? Why can't you tell me which girl you like? Why can't you tell me who you're going out with? Why is it secret? Men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. When you can't bring things into the light, something is wrong with it. So any relationship that is a secret is a wrong relationship. Even if it is within the family. Sexual abuse happens to both boys and girls, eh? It is perpetrated by both men and women. And it cuts across lines of race, socioeconomic level, education level, and even religious affiliation. In most cases, sexual abuse is part of an overall family pattern of dysfunction. Father, Son, not Holy Ghost. Sometimes it's part of a pattern of family disorganization and inappropriate role boundaries. Responsibility for sexual abuse in all cases rests entirely with the adult. No child is responsible for being abused. Most sexually abused children are too frightened of the consequences for themselves and their families to risk telling another adult what is happening. And as a result, they grow into adulthood carrying feelings of self-loathing and shame and worthlessness. They tend to be self-punishing and have considerable difficulties with relationships and with sexuality. Regardless of the kind of dysfunction or abuse, effects vary widely across individuals. And support from healthy adults and success in other areas or positive changes in the family could help prevent or minimize the negative effects. And then there is domestic abuse or domestic violence in particular. Many sources confirm that domestic violence is a major reason for marital breakdowns. The cycle of violence often repeats from one generation to the next and puts marriage under threat from the outset. So any girl going around with anybody who shows signs of sexual or physical abuse, leave them right away. Don't even contemplate getting engaged. Violence and abuse of power are evident in all types of families, with many men viewing their partners and children as their property. That's why when we teach in marriage about mutual respect, violence is a major contributor to the breakdown in relationships. And where issues of power are dominant, the result is often violence, trauma, sexual abuse, or social isolation affecting mainly women and children. So these are some characteristics of dysfunctional families as you evaluate your family. But what about the characteristics of healthy families? These are what you should avoid. What about some of the characteristics to what we should try to ascribe to? Researchers have studied carefully the characteristics of healthy families, which I would give my own labels to with some biblical support. Now, while there are no ideal families in the Bible, Scripture does give us some principles which can enhance the health of our families. And if you have your brochure for this month, you will see a short message on it, which could be helpful as a reminder of today's message. But of course, the space given in the brochure does not contain the amount of information you'll get in this message. So the better way to do it is to buy the CD or the DVD, or even better yet, take notes of your own. It's important to a healthy family that all members be committed. I want everybody to say commitment. Commitment to the family and to each other is very essential. Individualism is a threat to healthy family life. What did I say? Individualism is a threat to family life. What did I say? Yes, to healthy family life. Many couples enter marriage believing that individual rights and needs should override the good of the marriage partner. And that's why when we teach premarital counseling and marital enrichment, we talk about a love that is sacrificial. If you want to get in this business, you need to get it right if you want it to last. It's not all about you. You're not the center of the universe. The world does not revolve around you. And if you wanted to live in isolation, you should have lived alone. If you wanted it all to be about you, then you need to remain single. How could you share your life with another person and not share? Am I making any sense to you? This morning you're awfully quiet. But I know why. Still waters run deep. You can't talk and think at the same time. Individualism is a threat to healthy family life. The reason why I keep regurgitating that is because our modern day society teaches us the value of individualism. And we are bombarded by this modern philosophy. And many people are taking it in and they don't realize that that is what is destroying a marriage. That is what is destroying a family. That is what is destroying relationships. That is what is destroying a life. Many couples enter marriage believing that their individual rights and needs are more important than the good of their partner. And such couples often have very unrealistic expectations of their marriage. The research in the US by Mr. David Blankenhorn, president of the Institute of American Values, indicated that the principal reason for the weakening of marriage as an institution was a generational change in attitude toward the meaning of marriage and marriage commitment, and a strong move towards commitment to self and individualism is one of the primary causes for breakdown in marriages. And that's why I refer you to God's word in Malachi chapter 2 verse 14. The Lord challenged the nation of Israel with regard to their commitment to him in many different areas. And one of the areas in their life that he challenged them with was in the area of their spousal relationships. He says, "Yet you say, wherefore? Because the Lord had been witness between you and the wife of your youth," your original one. I'll leave that there. Now, the reason why I leave that there is because we live in a dysfunctional world. We live in a broken world. And we have to minister to broken people. And while we uphold the ideal, we still have to minister and support and not add more injury to already injured people. But we must not forget the standard. We must not forget the ideal. It's just a situation where we cannot unscramble scrambled eggs. So if you're already divorced, if your relationship is already broken, we just have to treat with that reality. But it's not just about repairing broken relationships. It's also about enriching the relationships that do exist. And it's also about preparing singles for the best relationship possible. So I still hold firm to my view that when he says the wife of your youth, he's talking about the original one. Why didn't he just say a wife? Say, I was witness between you and the wife of your youth. That original covenant, that original vow you gave, I was there. God says that. So what it is you're doing now? Dealing with your wife treacherously, bringing in concubines, abandoning her, going for a next woman. What are you doing? And then you're coming to church and giving offering. And crying and praying and getting involved in ministry. What you're doing? You're dealing treacherously. I was there. Yet, she's your companion, and yet she's your wife of covenant. And that's why that word covenant is starkly in contrast to the concept of individualism. There are similarities and there are vast differences between contract and covenant. In both cases, there's an agreement and there is expectation of two parties. For example, if I want to buy a piece of property from you, we sign a contract. Say, how much for the land, Sharon? You say, Pastor, $1 million. I say, okay, I could make that. Here, hold $100,000 and I'll make up the $900,000 in 3 months. And in the contract, you say, if after 90 days, I don't give you the $900,000, you are free to sell the property to somebody else and even free to keep the $100,000 which you already, to go with the benefits that you already have. So the contract has an agreement, but it also has an agreement of how to end the contract if it doesn't work out. And similarly, on the other side, I'm saying, fine, I'll agree to that, but if you don't pay off your mortgage and get rid of those quarters and make sure your rates and taxes are up to date, give me back my $100,000. So we have agreement, we have expectations, but my performance of what is expected of me is dependent on your performance of what is expected of you, and we already agree what we're going to do to part ways. And that's a contract, and it's legal and binding. A covenant, on the other hand, has expectations of each other. A covenant, on the other hand, looks forward to a mutual beneficial relationship. But the difference is, my performance of my commitment is not based on your performance of yours. I am committed to do what I am committed to do, whether or not you do what you are committed to do. And very often we stand before the pastor and before God. And we say, for richer or poorer. But what happens when the man gets retrenched and he can't bring in the money and he can't pay the mortgage and upkeep your lifestyle? You leave him and you're gone. What happened for richer or poorer? For sickness and in health. Your wife gets crippled and she's bedridden. And therefore, she obviously cannot perform certain wifely duties. So you go outside. This is not the same thing as cooking. I can buy lunch outside and it doesn't affect my marriage. He who have ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the prophet, to the church. I don't have to explain anymore. Who don't understand? You're not old enough. For richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. So we stand before the altar of God and we make covenant vows with a contract mentality. Hidden bank accounts, hidden houses, just in case you put me out. How do you expect your marriage to work if you're not committed? So commitment is a primary characteristic of a healthy family. Couples who are committed to their marriage will discover the means of sustaining it. It is vital that family takes priority over external interests. Healthy families tend to eliminate outside activities from taking prominence over the family. And they rather select activities that promote the family as being important and help the family to grow closer. Members are concerned about one another's welfare and happiness. So because you're a young adult, 24, 25 years, and you have a key, doesn't mean you can come home 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock anytime you want. Because you're big and you give mother $400 a month. Without concern or care about worry. And then when challenged, you argue and then you make it a fight rather than be accountable and responsible. Because when you get married, are you going to treat your husband like how you treat your father? I could lie for as long as I want. I could go all I want. You can't tell me nothing. Let your husband do you that and see if you like it. And both of you all are consented adults. It has nothing to do with your age. It has to do with making family priority. And being considerate and concerned for the welfare of one another. So members are concerned about one another's welfare and happiness, and they seek to structure their lifestyle in ways that will promote unity and harmony. Commitment is a very important characteristic of a healthy family. Another important characteristic of a healthy family is companionship. Remember in the scripture that we read before, it says, yet she is your companion. And when I talk about companionship, it involves communication and spending time together. Healthy families spend time together. Everybody say that. The amount of time is also as important as the activity involved. So say, I may not spend quantity time, but I'll spend quality time. How many of you like hamburgers? Let me see hands. All right. Whatever hamburger you like, do you want it this size? How many of you like roti? Whatever kind of roti you like, whether it's bus up short or thing, do you want it this size? So it's not about quality. It's about quality in quantity. There's only one single man agreed with me. And it's just he and his mother. The rest of you, time is not important to you. You want quality time in quantity. And then it have some people, they spend a lot of time together, but what is they doing? Arguing, fighting, fussing, criticizing. So it's not just about the quantity time either. It's about quantity, quality time. Am I making sense to everybody? If you don't agree with me, stand up and say no. Companionship. My children are in their early 20s, and my daughter will still hold my hand and walk in the mall. There are some young people, they don't want to be seen dead with their parents. Why? I have 2 young adult children, and we still look forward to family holidays. And they still have very healthy social lives. So my family is not a closed family, where nothing could come in and nothing could go out. We schedule holidays together, and as they grow older, it's more difficult. But even if it is 1 week out of 52, of course, when they were young, it's 52 weeks. Because they're going nowhere without me. But as they grow older, they're given a little more liberty and they're allowed to interact. But how is a family to stay connected? Companionship is very important. In Acts chapter 2:44, this is not really a family, but it is the family of God, the church of God. Because remember, we're looking for principles. We can't get no perfect family as an example. So we're looking through the Bible and we're pulling out principles. And we're using research and studies, up-to-date research and studies, and comparing it with scripture principles, and we're coming out with principles that we could follow. That is what this is about. Are you following? So I still think that scripture is relevant, even though it's talking about the church. And they that believed were what? They were together. You have to be very careful about things that separate your family. I'm not judging anybody. I know some people, because of economics, are driven to take jobs away from their family. If my wife is away from me for more than 11 days, I have a problem. And 11 days is very long. She can't even go away for 3 weeks by her family. Except I go in. And it's not that she's forbidden. It's just that, sometimes a little space is good. Wait, only agree with that one. And only didn't agree with quality time. Individualism. Individualism has seeped into the church. That's why the Lord sent me to preach this message to you today. But those gaps can't be and shouldn't be too long. Even though it may be driven by necessity, can't be too long. Some people a whole year, 2 years, 6 months, living apart. And they're not even using the technology with Skype and all those things where you can have, and FaceTime and all those things. So they were together and they had things in common. I won't share with you the level at which we share in our family. I'll just leave that to your imagination. But you see the size of my son? I have very few things that are mine. But I'm not saying anymore. All I'm saying is that we have things in common. Where is he, by the way? So they gave to every man according to his need. So I don't know what is this thing with my money, and I pay this bill and you pay that bill. If you come short, will you come up with it? If you come short, I come up with it. We share things in common. I'm just sharing these principles with you. Companionship. They continued daily in one accord in the temple. They went to church together. The same church. They didn't go to church at the same time. They went to church together. Now, I know all of us have dysfunctional families, every single one of us. And we have dysfunctions at different levels. But I'm just sharing with you principles that you could address in your own family as best you could. Because it's not even dependent upon one person. But I'm just saying that companionship and togetherness, communication, spending time together, breaking bread, eating meat. What about lunchtime and dinner time and so on? Long ago, you had to be home at a certain time to sit at the family table. Now everybody open, take what they want from the pot, who sit down by the TV, who by the computer, who by the laptop, blah, 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 how it swing and hang. You know what family time is nowadays? All of us sit down together in the living room, you watching the television, you on your laptop and you on your iPad. And you on your phone, texting a friend outside. So you see, it's not just quantity time, it's quality time. Amen? Is Pastor making any sense this morning? Healthy families spend time enthusiastically doing activities that all the family members enjoy, support one another's interests through attention and encouragement. If somebody's interested in photography, well, the family does that. If somebody's studying, family's interested in how the studies are going. If somebody's interested in dance, family goes to the shows when they're performing. If somebody's an athlete, the family goes to the meets. For families of members of footballer, you go to the games. You support each other's interests. Your family. Companionship, communication, and time together. Healthy families also create traditions, such as celebrating birthdays. Anybody who has an appointment on any of our birthdays have to check with the rest of the family. That's a tradition we have because we always celebrate birthdays together. And it's only like if somebody is out of the country or something that another day is set. That's just how our family is created. I'm not saying you have to do that, but I'm just saying what healthy families do. Holidays and other important events. On an interpersonal level, the most common factor cited as causing marital breakdown was poor communication skills. And I have discovered that in my own practice as a pastoral counselor. People come with different problems and different differences. And in every single case, without question, the real problem is poor communication skills. Because nothing is wrong with being different. Me and my wife are different. But we're married for 27 years, and we don't want to change that status. As a matter of fact, I'm absolutely not interested in starting a relationship with anybody. I am so comfortable with who I am, I don't need to impress nobody new. Because right now, I don't have to impress anybody. I don't know how people could do it. But communication skills. The Community Mediation Service of Tasmania suggested that with the majority of counseling sessions in their experience, it is clear that many individuals are not able to clearly and assertively state their needs to avoid the buildup of resentment or anger which becomes destructive to the marriage. Partners frequently express that their emotions have not been acknowledged, and that does be a problem. Sometimes even in a counseling environment, you feel that you're getting through. You feel that you're making progress because you're giving the parties an opportunity to express their emotional hurts and so on. And just when it's an appropriate opportunity for one partner to admit, yes, sorry, I really didn't recognize that, I'll work on that, they throw back something that the next partner was doing wrong. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, even though I know I'm dealing with some of you, but I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I wonder why couples come to me for counseling. And I'll tell you what it is I wonder. I wonder if they want to really get advice to solve the problem, or they just want another voice to tell their partner what they're doing wrong. I just have a question. If you're coming for an impartial view, for biblical direction and prayer, or if you're coming for a chorus line, somebody to back you up to get them good. And then you could go home and they say, see, I tell you so, look, pastor say this, and then I tell you so, look, pastor say that, look, pastor show me this, and you ain't studying your contribution. I just wonder. Not with everybody, but sometimes I just really wonder. You could still come back, but check yourself. That's the only issue I have. I don't have any problem with people coming to talk to me. But what's your motive? What's your real motive? You just want to use my influence of the pulpit to persuade your partner the way you want it to be? Or you really want to seek God's guidance in this situation and prepare to make your personal change and be responsible for yourself? It is expressed that partners would like to be listened to without a defensive, aggressive response. That's part of the problem in communication. There appears to be a lack of social relationship skills in dealing with problems in relationships. And let me tell you something. There is not a relationship yet that has ever happened that would not have conflict. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with conflict. And there's nothing wrong with disagreement. But it's when those disagreements turn to quarreling and arguing and degrading and that kind of thing, is then you begin to have a problem. You don't have a problem because you have a disagreement. You don't have a problem because you have a different approach. You don't have a problem because you feel strongly about different things. That is not the problem. The problem is your inability to resolve conflict. That is your problem. Inability or unwillingness. And again, it's because of this ideology of individualism, where somewhere in the back of your mind, it is your way or the highway. If you listen to good preaching, you won't need counseling. No? If you listen. Of course, counseling is important for you to be able to express and give feedback. So everything has its role. Everything has its role. So, where communication is poor, couples experience emotional isolation. And it's a very difficult thing to resolve a marriage where people are emotionally disconnected. You see, when people really want it to work, they're easier to work with. But when they're emotionally disconnected and they reach the point where they no longer care, there's very little that a counselor could do. So sometimes the poor communication skills cause couples experience emotional isolation, uncertainty, neglect, and guess what happens? Sexual difficulties. Again, because of the mixed audience, I'll just pause there. And sometimes those sexual difficulties propel people to seek intimacy outside the primary relationship. So a bad situation gets worse. So now after, I'm not giving nobody excuses, but after you create such a toxic environment where you're no longer emotionally connected, now you have a good excuse to divorce. Because this person committed adultery. this person thing. But why did the person go outside in the first place? I would say, why are you buying hamburgers at the side of your road if you have steak well prepared for you home? Something is wrong with you. Or something wrong with the steak at home. Maybe the steak frozen for months. It's frigid. And you hungry. Just saying. Just saying. Enough said. That deserves a drink of water, does it? So, very often you have men complaining about sexual neglect, and you have women complaining about emotional isolation. We're going to have a session on this without the children, so we can really get down to it. But we can have it with single adults, because you need to have good information before you get in. I understand what I'm saying? So, healthy families spend time conversing with each other, talking about events in each other's lives. And there are different levels of conversation. You have hallway talk, like what you do with most of your neighbors. How are you? Fine, thank you. And most of these questions are not questions of inquiry. It is just words of acknowledgement. I ask you how you are because you're there, not because I want to know. How are you? Fine, thank you. And I say fine, thank you because I ain't telling you my business. But we just want to be civil and courteous to each other. How are you? Fine, thank you. And you? I'm well, thanks. Bye. Oh, happy. But that doesn't work in relationships and in family life. Hallway talk. And then you have factual talk, where you just give the facts. Mom and Ali died at 74. You give the facts. But then you have intellectual talk, where you share not just the facts, but you share your thoughts, your opinions. What do you think about child marriages? You don't just say, they're debating and they're discussing child marriages. Yes, it's in the papers. The talk goes deeper than that. And then there is even a deeper level, or should I say a higher level of communication. Emotional talk. How do you feel about that? Do we spend time getting into these levels? It is like platforms. You go up and down, but do you ever reach the higher level? Or it's just your whole relationship about facts? Kevin needs some money for allowance. Here, you can get it there. This one needs to buy some shoes. Here, you can get that there. Done. Just facts. Nothing about how you think. The pipe need to fix. Okay. What you think about renovating the bathroom? How you feel about using this color? And then you have the highest platform of open, intimate communication. We're talking about family life. We're talking about companionship. Remember, God was there from the beginning when you made that vow. And in spite of the fact that you're acting treacherously, she's still your companion. Some people, and I know of 3 cases, where the husband has dealt treacherously with the wife. And when the husband gets sick and old, it's the wife of his youth that nursed him to his death. She's still your companion. Why you continue to act treacherously? But that's only happened in a few cases. Because you see, 2016, these young girls are taking that. Sick and old. If you only turn back, I done occupied already, boy, I'm sorry for you. Isn't that a reality? Malachi 3:16 says, "Then they that feared the Lord spoke often one to another, and the Lord hearkened and heard it." So the Lord pricks his ears. He tunes in when we have conversation with each other. And it's recorded. It's recorded. Now, a very important part of communication is good listening. You know, James says, you must be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. In other words, don't get vexed too quick. Chill and listen. There may be some validity to the other person's point of view. And don't be too quick to talk and to jump in and to finish next person's conversation and to criticize and to define. Let them, you have one mouth and two ears. In other words, you must seek first to understand before being understood. And that encourages intimacy. Because you're more interested in what the other person has to say than you're interested in what you have to say. And that takes discipline. Especially in this individualistic society. I find this sermon turning into a seminar. I said plenty of things I didn't plan to say. So, good listening develops mutual respect and it emphasizes each person's view. And that each person's view is valid. I may not agree with you, but it's a valid view. I may not feel the way you feel, but your feelings are valid. So we need to be careful about minimization. Members must feel free to share their joys and sorrows. Now, it involves conflict. I always say conflict is inevitable, but combat is optional. Conflict is a part of every single family. But the healthy family is able to fight fairly and to resolve the conflict when it occurs. Healthy families are not perfect. They may have yelling. They may have bickering. They may have misunderstanding and tension and hurt and anger, but not all the time. In healthy families, emotional expression is allowed and accepted. Family members can freely ask for and give attention. In Ephesians 4:15, it says, "But speaking the truth in love may grow up in him in all things, which is the head, even Christ." 3 principles. 1, we must speak. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15, please. We must speak. But when we speak, we must speak the truth. We must not lie to one another. But even though we speak in the truth, it must not be plain talk, bad manners. We must speak the truth in love so that we can grow up in all things. And let's have 2 more things to say. The 4th thing is convictions. Spirituality and values. Identifying and practicing a set of deeply held values and moral standards is an essential component of strong families. Some families demonstrate these beliefs through participation in organized religion. And this is going across the board from Christian and non-Christian families. Others may involve themselves in worthy causes. But parents are expected to be good examples for their children and to teach their children moral values. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 and 9. Moses says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord." And then goes down further to verse 6. Or let's go back to verse 5. Something wrong with that, eh? Some scriptures slip in there that shouldn't be there. But it says, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in your heart." So you as a parent must fear the Lord and you must have a personal relationship with God and God's word must be in your heart. But you have a responsibility to teach what's in your heart diligently, which means with a steady, constant effort to your children. So it's not just about sending your children to Sunday school and when they come home there's a different value system. What could 1.5 hours of Sunday school junior church do with the rest of the week of inconsistent Christian lifestyle? What influence could your pastor have if you go home on a Sunday and have your pastor over for lunch? I'm not saying inviting him for a meal. I'm saying eating him up over your meal. Criticizing him. He does preach too long. He does talk too hard. He ain't know where today. He ain't know what time to end service. He doesn't know where to shut up. He doesn't know where to sit down. And then when you have problems with the child, you bring in the child for me to talk to. When you don't tell the child, don't listen to me. What do you expect me to do? Shake your hand and pray for you? Don't waste my time. If you ain't listening to me here, why are you listening to me inside of there? Remember, we have a relationship too. The only thing is I have the mic and I can speak my mind. But you can see me after and speak your mind too. Are you with me? So you disregard the church. Church is not important. Everything else is more important than church attendance, church involvement, the teaching of God's word. And then all of a sudden you expect the church to solve the problem when the church is not respected in the family and the church have no precedence or preeminence in the family structure. You're not even coming to church. All kind of false excuses to stay away. And yet you want that same church to reinforce values when there is a problem, when you could have had preventative measures. Are you together? So you... Hi, Anna. You need to fix that. Thank you. You need to teach this diligently to your children, not only in formal structures, but while you walk by the way, while you lie down in bed, while you're driving up the highway, while you're looking at movies. My children always tell me, Daddy is always like a talk through movies. You know why? I give them an opinion about everything. And since they're small, are shaping their mind and are shaping their biases too. I'm telling you, that's the role of parenting. Bring them up in the fair nature of the Lord. Talk. That's how my mother raised me. I used to find my mother is like a phone that nobody will hang up. Ringing. I used to be in school and here calling me. And guess what? Half the thing I tell you is from the word of God and the other half is from my mother. Because it rings enough in my head. It can't get out. Are you there? Who you want to talk to your children, who you want to train your children, who you want to shape their values and their ideologies. The family must have convictions. The family must have convictions. The family must be known for certain standards and moral values. We're talking about a healthy family. So you must talk of these principles when you sit down in your house, when you walk in the way, when you lie down, when you get up. You must bind them for signs in your hand. What kind of jewelry is wear? What kind of things is buy? What kind of horoscope? That's what you want your children doing? Which sign you're born under? Maternity ward, if you please. That's the sign I'm born under. No moon, no star out there month can determine my character. My character is a result of my inherited nature mixed with my nurturing. Some of us, we have to watch our language because we are perpetuating certain cultural values that are totally unscriptural. So that's why when they're in trouble, they're reading the horoscope before reading the Bible. Ephesians 6:4 says, "Ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the fear, the nurture, and the admonition of the Lord." So identifying and practicing a set of deeply held values and moral standards is an essential component of strong families. Now, some families demonstrate these beliefs through participation in organized religion, while others involve themselves in worthy causes. Parents can express values by having open discussions about cultural trends. Even now, my children come to me all the time and ask me about anything. Anything. Hairstyles, tattooing, multiple earrings in the ears, earrings for boys, alcohol, drinking alcohol, moderation or otherwise. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. That kind of relationship is an imperative. Earlier in my parenthood, I used to get shocked. How could you possibly think of even conceiving of asking a question like that? But I trained myself not to respond that way. Because if you respond that way, you're going to shut them up. And you'll lose your opportunity to influence. So they must feel free to come and ask you anything. No topic is taboo. I remember as a very, very young boy, my son comes up to me and said, "Daddy, what is sex?" I nearly flipped. My neck nearly break like Eli. I think about all the books and all the encyclopedia. How am I going to explain to this child about sex? And I say, sex is male and female. You have to give age-appropriate revelation. That's the first thing I must know about sex. Sex is male and female. So when you grow up, they can't tell you that gender is sex. That's another story. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to learn. But I think you get the point that we must be able to talk about cultural trends, reading books and so on that contain moral messages. I used to buy all sorts of books for them, positive driven youth and all of that, trying to encourage them to read, put up signs on the wall, thank you me, that reinforce messages, posters and so on up on the wall, things on the fridge that reinforce messages that are scriptural. Joshua in Joshua 24:15 says, "And if it seems evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you to whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house," he made a decision for his house. Eh, Shami? It's not me alone and the children can do what they want. What? As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So once you get that in your DNA, you will be very careful about who you marry and who you court, about what you study and what you do for recreation, because regardless of what you do and where you go, we in this house will serve the Lord. And Sister John? I know Sister John like that. If you see Sister John's face, she light up like a Christmas tree. The only thing she had to do is get up and preach. Say, "Amen, Pastor." But I feel the amen inside of you. Yes, you have to have standards. You have to have family convictions, spiritual values. That is very important. In second, the most effective method is allowing your children to observe you practicing your ethical convictions. I said, "Understand me, Daddy is a real pastor." I said, "No, I'm a Christian." Because I don't want him to feel that this standard has to do with the job. I said to him, Daniel and Joseph were not pastors. They were not prophets. They didn't even have a church to go to. Daniel just had 3 friends that he used to pray with. He belonged to a cell group. He didn't belong to no church. Yes, there was no church. But yet, his character, his standard, his intimacy with God, his anointing, his spiritual gifting could outweigh any professional prophet in the Old Testament, in the whole Bible. So it has nothing to do with your position or your ministry. It has to do with your relationship with God. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I don't have to be a pastor. I don't have to be a Bible school graduate. Children may not hear everything we say, but they see everything we do. In 2 Timothy 1:5, the Apostle Paul says to Timothy, "When I recall to remembrance the unfeigned faith that is in thee, which dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I'm persuaded in thee also. There was a generational value system of faith that passed on. 2 Timothy 3:14-15. Continue thou in the things which thou hast learned, and hast been assured of, knowing of whom you have learned them, and that from a child. From when? From a child. Don't let the child grow up anyhow, and when he get old, he will choose. Why didn't let him choose what nursery school he was going to? Why did you choose everything for him except religion and church? From a child, you learn the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation through faith which is in Jesus Christ. You know, in Jeremiah 35:6, there's a man called Jonadab. And he declared that there will be no drinking of wine, neither ye nor your sons forever. And Jonadab forbade his descendants to drink wine or to live in cities. And that was a command they followed for several generations. That is family value. Healthy families have rules. Rules which tend to be clear and consistent, but with some flexibility to adapt to individual needs and particular situations. Healthy families allow for individuality. Kevin's hairstyle is not mine, right? Each member is encouraged to pursue his or her own interests, and boundaries between individuals are honored. Children are given responsibilities appropriate to their age and are not expected to take on parental responsibilities. In healthy families, everyone makes mistakes. Mistakes are allowed. Perfection is unattainable and unrealistic. But there will always be some common moral and spiritual values embraced by the family. You know, research has even shown that couples who actively share the same faith and go to the same church fare better than couples with mixed faiths or no faith at all. And part of the reason could be the community of faith encourages a certain value system. Like you see right now I'm preaching, this is influencing the families and the couples who are here. But if you are here, you're hearing me preach, and your husband right now is in the rum shop, do you know when you're going home what is going on? But both of you are here holding hands, watching me and hearing this message, and your children in the back seat. When you're driving home in the car, you could talk about it. It strengthens the family. As a family, you grow together and you develop the same convictions and spiritual values. Don't wait till the horse leaves the stable. And the final thing is coping skills. Now, there are various forms of family stress. Normally, stresses are experienced by most families from time to time, such as getting married and adjusting to parenting and retirement and so on. But there are abnormal stressors, like natural disasters and massive economic collapse, incest, murder, assault, alcohol and drug addiction, family violence of the mental, physical, and sexual varieties, divorce and widowhood. Those are abnormal stressors. And some of these abnormal stressors tend to occur in selected families, sometimes happening at random, sometimes happening to families with special weaknesses. The effects of various family crises is based on the recognition and management of stressful events in our lives. Everybody will have some stressor in their life. Like right now, the Bino family is going through a stress with the matriarch being in hospital. But how much of a crisis it is seen as is going to be influenced by the resources of the family and how the family perceives the stressor. Sometimes families discover that overcoming and surviving crisis makes them stronger and more resilient as a result of the emergent talents and abilities that arise in the midst of the crisis. Others find that recovering is beyond their grasp, and they either stagnate at a lower level of functioning or find themselves dealing with new crises before the repairs can be done with the old crisis. If a family perceives that a negative event is beyond its resources to handle, then that constitutes a crisis for the family. A family resources could include such things as the number of family members generating incomes. That's why I find low-income families have more crises. Because just eking out a living is a crisis in itself. If you have more than one streams of income, it builds the resources to deal with that problem. What about the strength of the family head of the household? What about the wisdom of elder relations? All those are resources. These resources enable the family to deal with challenges which they face. Critical events are perceived to create a hardship, deplete family resources, and run contrary to the family members' goals. Members of the family become disorganized for a period of time when a stressor is perceived as a crisis. And the duration of this recovery depends on the level of functioning of the family and the perceived enormity of the crisis. If the crisis is seen to be too big and beyond their resources, then it becomes a real crisis. So families with a wider variety of resources upon which to draw strength will experience a shorter recovery time. And such families will suffer fewer crises. Families with few resources are more likely to suffer more frequent crises and longer periods of recovery, and less likely to return to their former functionality. And do you know that your faith is also a resource? And your relationship with God and your capacity for prayer is also a resource in dealing with crisis. Healthy families are able to find solutions to their problems, often depending upon one another for support. The support that they need. Proverbs 17:17 says, a friend loveth at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. In your time of adversity, the first person you should be able to call is a family member. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 16, the Apostle Paul says, if a woman is a believer and has relatives who are widows, she should help them. In this way, the church is not burdened and can help widows who have no families, who are widows indeed. The church is not responsible for solving everybody's problem, financial or otherwise. The first place is your own family. And if you don't take care of your own family, you're worse than an unbeliever. So family must be there to support in times of crises. Your sister needs an operation. You take out some money from your savings and you help them. You don't just pray for them and let them die. The church have to help people who have no help. Otherwise, the church will have no resources to help anybody, because everybody needs help. So the first port in a time of storm must be family. In Galatians 6:2, he says we must bear one another's burden and so fulfill the law of the Christ. So when healthy families cannot solve their problems, they must also be willing to seek external support for solutions, and you don't turn to suicide and abuse to solve your problems. So this morning, don't feel condemned if you do not have a perfect family. None of us do. However, you could strive to reduce the dysfunctions in your family and contribute to its health by 1, boosting your commitment to family life. 2, by enhancing the companionship within your family through spending time together and communicating more effectively. 3, by expressing commendation and appreciation wherever warranted. And I didn't take the time to talk about that, but that was an important part. Where you celebrate. God had said, before Jesus even made a miracle and called a disciple, he said publicly, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. When people grow up without that affirmation from their parents, they grow up very emotionally wounded. And you don't have to wait till the children graduate from university with a degree to affirm them. And then he affirmed them privately before Peter, James, and John, and said, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased, hear ye him. And the Bible is replete in the letters of Apostle Paul, where people are commended and appreciated for their contributions. So we must express commendation and appreciation. That's an important aspect of a healthy family life. We're warranted, because you don't pamper and give people basket, tell them the truth. In our family, we're very truthful. Sometimes you could be accused of being too blunt. But you know, my argument is, who you want to tell you? You meet a mama guy and somebody outside tell you? Me and my wife, she said, well, that shit looking good. I said, well, that just looking like a pajama. That outfit look like a choir stool. I might sound insensitive. Say, why are you so emotionally insensitive? So we have to learn emotional sensitivity. But truth is important. So you don't give basket, but there are many areas in which you could commend one another, commend one another's faithfulness. My wife is an excellent cook, and she's a dedicated mother and wife. And she's also beautiful, and she's also, anyway. You have to give public and private commendation and appreciation. Do it with your children too. Well done. Good job. When a child drawing stupidness, They're exercising their skills. Put it up on the fridge. Yes. You will validate their interests. When they draw a card and they say, hey, Mother's Day, happy Mother's Day, is an effort. Thank you, darling. Keep it. Appreciation, commendation, where warranted. Strengthen your spiritual convictions and moral values, and develop coping skills to support each other in times of crisis. Let's bow our heads in prayer.